Hey guys, Ronan Will here. Um, Doing a quick paint tutorial. Well, not really so much a tutorial. This is one of the projects that's been eating up a lot of my free time. Um, I enjoy painting models, and so I figured try my hand at actually showing you guys how I paint and what I do. So right here, I primed this model black. I usually, for these models, I usually prime them white. I've ran out of white primer, so black it was. Anyway, so right here I'm just putting a base coat of white on the lower half of this model to allow me to, what is it called, eventually brighten it up. Right there was a quick shot of what paint I'm using. It's the special edition from Army Painters. I think that was called like Fresh Snow White or something. It's all it is really is just their white paint with a Super Dungeon logo on it. Um, this model is actually from Super Dungeon. It's one of their what they're calling master collections. This is a full model where you actually have to assemble the whole thing. Um, so I'm just on here. I'm kind of just blocking out what I was thinking of doing for white, and you'll see later on that I decided to change it up a bit. Um, yeah, so we're gonna just go through this real quick. Sorry if the audio is a little weird. I don't have my microphone right now. So, and this is all post, obviously, post editing. I had to speed it up because otherwise this would be either a 4-hour paint tutorial or it would take, 5 different episodes to paint. I'm also still learning the best location for the camera, so if I do any more of these, I'm probably going to move the camera around just to see where I actually want the camera, because right now I was actually painting around the camera, which was kind of a pain in the ass. So, yeah. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I had to wait for the white to dry. Jumped over to the blue now. This model really doesn't have too many different color paints, which is part of the reason why I started with it for these tutorials. But there are quite a few nuances. Again, sorry about the camera angle. But that's part of starting out with YouTube, is still learning camera angles and stuff like that. So this is just I think I accidentally cut out this part. This is the blue, I think Army Painter calls it turquoise blue. I don't water down any of my paints. I find that it actually ends up taking more time to dry and more time to work with. Several extra layers, especially when it's black on, white on, or color on black. You need that extra, there you go. You can actually see how thin the paint is already. You can actually see through the paint at spots. So, and it's funny because you really can't see that in this video, but I actually end up having to go over every one of these spots like 4 or 5 times because it's so thin, these paints. I think it might just be a result of not being shaken well enough, but I've noticed that Army Painter, I prefer not watering down the paints because you really don't need to. I know most people prefer to. Again, preferences are, whatever you feel is best. So all I'm going to be doing is painting the model in this episode. I'm going to then turn around and in another episode I'm going to paint the base of the model, do some actual build up on the base, because usually these bases have, if it's a master class, it's just a black base, which kind of is lame. So I'm going to build those up a little bit, put maybe some coloring and paint, and make it look like maybe a forest or something. Yeah, you can see I'm going over now and quickly running out of room on where to hold this model. So usually, if it's a smaller model, I can usually, I have a holder for it that allows me to hold it up without touching the model. But since this isn't even on a base, I end up having to just kind of hold it and try and avoid touching wet paint. So, just about done here with base coat. Well, base coat of blue. There are still a few touch-ups and a few spots that I actually do have to paint more on. Yeah, this is, again, a lot of this is just playing around, seeing what I like, what I don't like. I'm not painting from a reference. I know a lot of my other a lot of other projects I do have reference guides, but I kind of wanted to try my hand at just free painting, see if I like it or not. So that's a very close-up look at my my paintbrush, which is an Army Painter paintbrush. I like the Army Painter stuff. It's a little bit cheaper. Okay, so here's the next part. This is gold. I think it's the gilded gold they call it. And I'm just going to do a quick paint over the cuff that's on it. I liked the effect that the black gave on that cuff already. And later on, when I'm shading it, you'll see that I don't even bother redoing the cuff coloring. And the reason for that is because I like the damage or the rust. So now I'm using red and a little bit of I think they call it barbarian skin and dragon red, or maybe that's what their regular one is. And then I'm testing out to see if I like the scar coloring. You'll see it's super, super watery. Again, I think the paints have to be moved, shaken up a little bit more. I added a little bit more red, peach. I can't remember what I added a little bit more of. But I added the coloring there, and then I added the little scar on his eye. Then it was the yellow. This is just a simple yellow straight to the eye to color it in yellow on both sides. You have to be a little careful here because of the wet paint. Okay, so now I'm letting him sit. I'm doing a few touch-ups that I decided I wanted to do here. You'll see actually near the end of this that you'll see that I actually changed the muzzle to be completely white. That's just, again, just a preference to try and move the white into the blue a little bit. So, and once we're done with that, we do the top of the ears just to differentiate some of the color. And actually it breaks up the monotonous of the blue very well on the upper parts. The brush size I'm using is actually a detailing brush. It's super, super small. Again, I'm just, you'll see, I paint over those paws like 10 times, just till I get what I want. And that's the nice thing about these paints, is like they go over each other very well. But yeah, this is his very basic coat. I think the last thing I do before dark coating is add a little bit of that peach mixture, the peach and red, into the mouth to give it some actual color. So I gave it kind of a foxtail effect where it's white on the tip, and then I'm going to add some more blue to it to clean up some spots that I may have dripped on or want to change. There we go. Okay, and then if I remember correctly, like I said, the last thing is that mouth. I wiped off. Oh, I did a little bit of dry brushing there. Michelle will actually do some dry brushing later on in the in this video. I'm okay with dry brushing. Okay, so now here I'm putting the yellow on his claws to give him kind of a weathered claw look. So this game, Super Dungeon Explorer, is the name of the game. And they're supposed to be like very anime character designs. So you can get away with like the blues and the bright colors and everything else. I've also painted some Star Wars models. Maybe one day I'll do a video on those, and you'll see that this was kind of stupid of me. I did the eyes, I filled in the eyes and everything, but as you'll see later on when I'm dark coating or shading it, the eyes kind of get messed up. So I end up having to redo the eyes anyway, because you want the eyes to be very, vibrant and bright. Okay, so that should do it for the base coating. Do a quick little look at it. Now I'm using, they call it dark ink. It's a shader that they use, and this, I find the easiest way to use this stuff is actually just to cover the whole model in it. However, do not, if you want to add detail and everything, I wouldn't recommend doing their dip of shader, just because it makes it really, really hard to paint over it. It's almost like a plastic or a rubber when you dip it, compared to this, which is more of a paint. So you just want to try and fill the entire model with this. It does result in having to repaint over the high spots on the model if you want. Some of my earlier stuff, my earlier Super Dungeon stuff, actually just are dark tones. I never did highlights on them. But this guy, you'll see, I then do highlights. I've come a long way, I feel, from my first set of painting on models, which maybe eventually I'll show you guys my earlier stuff. I didn't record any of it, but I'll show you what I painted. Yeah, you can see I really am not watching the camera while painting. Every so often I realize I'm off screen. I will get better at that, I promise. Yeah. As well as avoiding saying the word I've always had an issue with that. So, anyway, so this is the kind of like the messiest part. I usually would like to wear gloves or something for that, but I forgot to put gloves on. Use a lot of this. So if you are planning on starting painting and you want a quick shader, you could also do this all by hand, paint in dark spots and light spots, which a lot of tutorials will show you. I don't have the patience. That's also why I don't water down my paints, because watering down the paints mean you have to do like 7 or 8 layers of paint. So instead I use it straight up, and I'm just about done here. So this is the hard part, is when you run out of space to hold the model. Again, if I had the base on it, all I would have to do is hold the base. However, without a base, I have to place it on my painting palette there, and do as you can see. I have to paint it from a distance. To your lower right is my water bucket. You always want to, you know, clean up your paints. Okay, so this is a couple of hours later. That stuff really takes a long time to dry. And now this is touch-ups and highlights. So I'm going to basically just be picking all the highest points, and this model made it very easy to find those highest points. Sorry. Yeah, so the highest points on each model, you want to touch up after doing dark tones to brighten it up enough where it's like, well, not very visible, but like, oh look, it's highlights. Yeah, so I do this for all of the blue first, and then I end up putting a secondary highlight layer on, which basically is just a brighter version of this blue to make it pop a little bit more against that dark blue recesses is what I was trying to think of the word for. So yeah, I might, in future videos, I might add audio, like music, to the background, just because these have a long time for me to keep like dialogue going, especially for stuff like this where I can explain what's happening in a couple of words. So I have plenty of these models that I've started painting. This is the first one that I'm actually going to post, but after that I'm going to work on these. This is why it took so long for me to get a second art video up. Sorry, a third art video up. This project and another project of mine, which I don't know how long that project's going to take to actually post, but it will be posted probably before the end of July, just because it is a little bit more labor intensive than paint. And as you can see, like I said, this is like a 3-hour process, 3 or 4 hours between just painting alone, not even doing the waiting for the paint to dry. So really any paints, any hobby paint will work. Some tutorials even tell you you can just go over to like Michael's and pick up you know, the cheapy paints, like I think there's like Home Crafter or something with an apple. I don't know. I've tested those paints before. They work fine, but I actually do prefer the Army Painter paints. And of course you have like your standard Warcraft paints. I can't remember I think they're Citadel paints. Those seem to be the most common among painters for this stuff. I don't mind it. I just am not a huge fan of the price. It's like $3, $4 for a small little pot that will only last you maybe a model this size. Actually, it will only last you probably the model, and you'll have to go buy new paints. Where, of course, that depends on if you water it down or not. But I like the Army Painter because they also come in those squeeze bottles that you've seen. And so you can actually be very accurate on how much you put out to blend your paints to get different color effects and stuff like that. I gotta say it. Stop saying Sorry guys, it's actually fairly early in the morning. I've been waiting for this to finish processing so I could work on the audio for it. So excuse me if I'm a little tired. This part is actually the hardest part. That's a very good view of my paintbrush that I'm using right now. It's super tiny. So just touching up, and you'll see I actually remove almost all of those dark spots on the coat just because I want mine a little bit brighter than realistic. With the realistic paint jobs, you can actually usually get away with just having it very dirty because if you clean it up, you'll notice that it's a little too clean. It will look more like cartoony or fake. And for a game that's all about cartooniness, that's kind of what I'm going for. So, yeah. Right here, I clean off my brush a little bit to try and do a little bit more dry brushing, just to again clean up the body. You'll see that you've probably noticed by now, I do this jumping around a lot, where I jump between sections. It's because sometimes I don't know how I'm going to do a certain section, and then I'll go back to it after painting another section because I got an idea on how to try it, or I just say screw it, let's give it a try. Alright, so we paint, and we're painting, and we're painting. So, again, I should probably in the next one look into getting some free audio to play over this. Maybe some good dungeon crawl music or something. Okay. So here I'm again changing the pause. You'll see I changed the pause quite a bit on here just because I'm not sure what I really want to do with them still. The model, the card for the model, because this is a game that it came with, actually has like the blue fur going over the model and over the feet, I mean, and I kind of try simulating that, but again, I'm not the best dry brusher, so I end up having Michelle do it, and she's a lot better with that. I'll show you one day. I'll show you the model she did by herself. She dry brushed the entire wings on one of my dragons, and it looks really good. It looks almost like it's a stained glass window type treatment on it. So, okay, so that's it for the blue, or I should say the normal blue. Now I added some more white to the blue. I'm going to mix that up. It takes a long time to mix. And there we go. I actually fell out of my chair there. Long story, but I dropped the paint and then I fell out of the chair trying to get it, and yeah. So now I'm putting a high, basically a super highlight coat on it. So, sorry about that, guys. If you could hear that, that was my phone going off. Don't know why, though. Anyway, so this is a super bright blue. If I was doing more of a metal, I would actually even do another layer of even lighter blue or a white to bring up those colors even more. So, and again, this will start the blending of the paints, which you'll see I just put a couple of dots now right there, that blue spot on his back. Obviously I don't want it to just be that one spot, but I'm going to come back to it eventually and try and do some wet blend or dry blending. Sorry, some dry brushing. The terminology is a little weird to me. Basically, dry brushing is where you take you take your brush, you take most of the paint off, and then you just kind of brush whatever remains onto the model. Here, I'm sorry, I forgot that I was recording at this point. There we go. It's also very uncomfortable where I'm sitting to try and paint like that. Like I said, I'm going to rotate the camera and play with the camera for the next couple of models I paint. But anyway, so dry brushing is basically you remove most of your paint off your paintbrush and you paint whatever's left onto the model. It tends to look very light and very splotchy at spots if you don't use the right brush, which I will not, because I am determined just to finish it at this point. It's been a couple of hours of painting, which I don't mind. I love painting, but you know, a few hours of doing the same model and sitting in the same way trying to paint around a camera kind of wears you out after a while. Okay, so this is when I actually started really liking the paint job on this guy. Anyway, so other terminology that may or may never come up in these videos is wet blending, which I've tried my hand at. I get kind of annoyed with wet blending because the whole idea is the model has, you know, both paint that's on the model and paint that's on your brush have to be wet to blend together as you paint. So it's, you know, again, it's a very simple concept, but one that tends to be a pain in the ass to actually execute. Okay, so right here I actually just did a quick brush over the top of the head there, and then I'm cleaning up a few spots on his face that I missed, doing the ears. Again, this highlight coat is basically just the most prominent pieces, and you'll see I actually box out here where I want it to be, and then I'm going to start dry brushing that looks really fast. I'm going to start dry brushing the edges of this model, just to give him like the sun is beating down on him. And that's just about it for the blue. Oh yeah, the tail. The highlights on the tail. Did I say that was about it for the blue? I meant that it's the tail still. Okay, but again, this doesn't really go that far. It's just the top of the tail, and I think the sides a little bit. Yeah. I don't go all the way around, but there you go. All right, so next is the whites. I hope. Yep, white. It's funny. I tend to rely on my white a lot, just as a both diffusing and changing the coloring on stuff, as well as a base color. My go-tos for changing the colors, if I want it lighter, will be white or a very light gray, and if I want it darker, will be, sometimes I end up using black, but more often than not I actually use a dark gray. So at that point I was just trying to see how the paint job on the face looked. So we're just about at the end here. We're doing this quick paint. This was actually my worst part. He has whiskers and everything, and I was just like dreading doing this section. Michelle kept suggesting to dry brush it, which will work. I just want to be a little bit more accurate with my brush work here than dry brushing usually allows. So once I do this, then Michelle takes over and does a highlight coat. But you'll see, not a highlight coat, a dry brush coat on sections of the paws and the sides. And she also adds one detail that I was holding off until after the dry brushing, but she ends up adding a little bit of sheen to the nose to make it look like it's a wet nose. Again, bringing it up way before it's actually on here. So again, you'll see I do a little bit of changing on color, and you'll, like most professional or most people on YouTube, you'll see once they make a choice on the color, that's it. I probably, and with the exception of, well, sorry about the blurriness here, the camera decided it wanted to focus on my paint palette instead of what I was painting. Again, just learning curve. Who says learning curve? Jeez. Way off topic. You'll see in a lot of my stuff that's my choice. Like all of these models, I'm going to basically just be painting the coloring I want. I might use some reference before or after I paint, or while I'm waiting for it, I might look up online what some other people's ideas were, and so that's why my paint jobs will change as I paint. But for the most part, this will be how it is. Gotta paint the back of him. And again, don't want any, gotta keep talking, otherwise you're gonna have just empty air while painting. Again, free music would be a good addition here. So I do a little bit of dry brush work over the sides there, just because it's such small, fine detailing. Alright, so here, oh yeah, I'm touching up the scar on him. Anytime I stop, I'm actually talking with Michelle about what she thinks I should add or change on him. So, the last, or the second to last section, sorry guys, again, the camera got shifted. And I'm doing the claws again, and then I'm going to do the eye again. Again, it's just to touch everything up. Make sure the brightness is how I want it. Okay, back to the eye. And there we go. Okay, so this next part, Michelle takes over here. And she's going to dry brush some of that white up into the blue to make it look like it's a little bit more blended. Again, it's the same process I was doing, just on a slightly bigger scale. She uses a bigger brush than I do when dry brushing. She's going to also dry brush a little bit on the feet. She's trying to use the empty white. Again, I go through a lot of white, especially on these cartoon character designs or anime characters, because they usually call for a lot brighter colors. So I don't know what she's doing here. She's looking for something, but she's starting to blend the claws or the feet a little bit. She just wants to touch up enough where, there you go. So then I think she said that she then switches and does the piece on the nose. I'm not sure what she's doing. I went to get a drink while she was working on this, and by the time I got my water, she was done with dry brushing. So she dry brushes really quickly. Oh, she did a little dry brushing on the head and on the nose. And then here I come in with the black to finish the one last piece, which is the eye. And that's it. He is done. Unfortunately, our freaking spin table does not work perfectly. So we're going to get that fixed. But there you go, guys.